Morning, everyone. And I am just astounded by what you have been able to accomplish, Johan, because I'm speaking to the world. And there is no greater opportunity to change lives when you are given the opportunity to speak to the world. Mr. Johan Hoshtialik, and of course his lovely daughter, you who have in fact been a tour de force in the context of intra and intergenerational responsibility. I can say it was just a phenomenal experience meeting you. It's been a very, very long time I have met an individual who, in my view, is a tour de force for humanity. Someone, in fact, with heart and with passion, commitment and professionalism. And it is basically great to know that we are doing this out of Grenada, a small island in the global south. And I envisage, in fact, that this island is like a mouse that will roar, that will send a message that is intractable with the necessary bite. Again, in fact, I must recognize, in fact, Linus Ishmael, another activist, our friend from England, and the executive of this noble initiative, including your daughter and family, because of course I can tell persons that, it is so important to have the support of family when you are engaged in this universal advocacy. So, soldier on, as we say in Spanish, vaya adelante. And I really, really will, you have my unstinted support with this very proficient, impacting advocacy, 195 in 365. Ladies and gentlemen, and of course, in fact, a very important climate activist I see there is my friend Steve. Continue to do the great work that you're doing. And, it's the quality of the persons that are here. Mr. Philip, who has demonstrated, in my view, remarkable service. And I have, in fact, been quite adamant in Trinidad and throughout the world to indicate that when, in fact, you are in the corridors of power, it is not about power. It is about service. And that service must always trump power in dispensing your responsibilities and duties. The technology of the fourth industrial revolution must be harnessed through systemic global education and processes to trigger the type of global sustainability network that addresses the collective concerns of humanity and not the selfish interests of the few. And of course, in that regard, I just need to give a special hail up to the students of Grenada. You all are, in fact, the potential powerhouse of Grenada, but more particularly of the Caribbean region. Leaders must establish humanity at all times. They must establish and guarantee an enabling environment that will allow countries to include global goals and sustainability components in their strategic developmental documents. Leaders must therefore refocus and embrace a human philosophy as part of an ongoing strategy that the sovereignty of the peoples of the world be given paramount consideration in the light of our very concerning, diminishing global resources and evolving crises. There are UN conventions, protocols, declarations, which envisage a better and greater world that lay dormant and are not operationalized because of governmental indifference and apathy at the national, regional, and international level. But then the stewardship of some global leaders are often known for its inaction, failed promises, implementation deficit, and a dire lack of vision. Globally, we are desperately in need of leadership that truly delivers. The right things are always being said, and the wrong things are always being done. Sustainability and its operationalization for all global leaders must be an imperative for the continued existence and prosperity of every nation state. I feel so deeply about the impacting influence of sustainability as a way of life that I recall an instance some years ago when, as head of state, I was addressing parliamentarians from all sides of the political divide during the ceremonial opening of the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament. I challenged them all to put their political party manifestos in the proverbial dustbin and adopt wholesale the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as their national development roadmap, in keeping with their social contract with the populace to pursue and realize the common good on behalf of each citizen. As head of state, I visited some 24 secondary schools in 1 year, advocating that the 17 developmental goals should be a component in every subject taught at the school, for our very survival is at stake. We, as the Caribbean people, as citizens of the global South, need to seize the time, and we are doing so now by launching an action plan of salvation, even redemption, by way of this remarkable and visionary initiative of Johan Hostialik in the form of the 195in365 initiative. As people from a small island development states, we have always had that intrinsic capacity, that probing intellect, the unrivaled competence, and the vision. But we have been hamstrung with governance models and democracy that at times are not enabling as it should be, with sometimes a skewed obsession with mediocrity, where at times we put mediocre performers in exceptional positions, expecting exceptional results, which are simply not forthcoming. However, there's a panacea in our young people. I stare you in the eye, knowing that you can make not a difference, but the difference. That you can go beyond the plaster and saw solutions of some of those who govern us in the Caribbean region. Our young people must and can be our salvation, can take up that intergenerational and intragenerational responsibility. But you all need a progressive, equitable, and fair socio-economic environment. And most of all, the tools, an education system and curricula consisting of critical thinking, invention, technology, innovation, with sustainability at its core. Ours is a system in need of rapid overhaul and recalibration, one that is sustaining, genuinely empowering, and real, connected to the tenets and transformational power of multilateralism, and relevant connected to the exigencies, urgencies, and demands of now, not only tomorrow. I raise multilateralism because it is under attack. And we as an organization need to engage it in a manner that will keep it relevant and connected at all times. Johan, you're a veritable gladiator in the trenches of fighting to preserve our planet. Sustainability as a concept has assumed untold dimensions never before in the light of the myriad challenges facing humanity. None, however, beckons more than climate change, or rather climate catastrophe. It is the axis of an impending human crisis that we can ill afford. We need, therefore, to be honest with ourselves by adhering to the rigor of conscience to find our way in the context of our environmental imperative. Through the voice of conscience, we can be disciples of right and contemner of wrongs. A guiding conscience remains the bulwark of economic and social sustainability by ensuring that doing right remains the only option when confronting all environmental challenges and crises. A conscience tells the doubting soul to do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. Sustainability in the context of social and national development has an individual and collective component. And when there is a dynamic supporting interaction among these two, the nation state prosper. Sustainable development is about engaging environmental, social, and economic components envisaged by the UN Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. Regrettably, we must now get into the palliative business of saving us from ourselves. Mother Earth yawns in anguish at the environmental and ecosystemic aberrations inflicted upon her with impunity. We can no longer depend solely on the voluntary action or self-regulation of nation states or corporate entities to save our planet. It is in this connection that I wish to reference and suggest a global law regime with global law regulations to arrest this ongoing environmental impunity taking place. And that is by the way of the establishment of an environmental court, the IEC. Global law as defined by the Global Law Forum, and I quote, is a system of principles, norms, and technological solutions aimed at the formation of global governance for sustainable development and the realization of global human rights, end of quote. The IEC has become mandatory as a means of deterrence, for it will mitigate the debilitating impact of human activity on our physical environment, our forests, our fauna, and flora. When it comes to environmental degradation, biodiversity protection, pollution, climate crimes, and judicial sanctions, the IEC will not allow nation states to hide behind a veneer of sovereignty. It will also culture responsibilities and obligations for nation states and transnational companies, and will invariably encourage countries to embrace global goals in their national policy and strategic documents. We need the sanctioning power of a court to stem the tide of ecological wrongdoing. The IEC's jurisdictional mandate will save the physical integrity of vulnerable states suffering the scourge of this climate emergency. The United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution A/71L58, requesting an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on the obligation of states concerning climate change. What is interesting is the genesis of this resolution. It was an initiative by students in Vanuatu, like yourselves, here today, and their government was influenced and joined ranks with them. And as a result, 193 countries at the UN came on board. And what is noteworthy and critical to this is the scientists were not left out, as often takes place in governance throughout the world. In order for this resolution to pass, the United Nations utilized scientific reports emanating from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, an advisory opinion, though very persuasive, will not have the jurisdictional clout or the force of law, for the ICJ cannot impose sanctions or impose penalties on any state or transnational company for its climate impunity. The International Criminal Court in the main has no power to interfere because it does not possess that jurisdictional reach. It has a specific jurisdictional mandate. And in any event, that juridical body that I was part of does not have the specialized scientific and environmental expertise which deal to deal with climate change violations. What is required is a permanent statute-based IEC to adjudicate on egregious environmental violations and impunity. I need to remind you all, just like with the ICC, the law of complementarity can be utilized effectively. COP30 in Brazil is therefore perfect for advancing the establishment of the International Environmental Court, because there is a subsistent, numerically strong international climate change consensus. And when fortified by, hopefully, the still pending ICJ's Commission advisory opinion, the Sixth Committee and the International Law Commission can get to work laying the groundwork for a statute and the creation of the IEC. The United Nations customary threshold requirement is therefore very achievable. Finally, over the years, we have witnessed the ravages of climate change, whether it be record high temperatures and virulent fires in the global north, or devastating hurricanes, flooding, sea erosion, and other severe weather patterns in the global south. And they are all compromising many nation states' ability and capacity to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Given the slow pace of environmental redemption, I wonder whether leaders have sensitized their populace, adopting a consultative and educational approach as to why it is necessary to reduce global temperatures by 1.5 degrees Celsius to pre-industrial levels in combating climate change. If this happens, the average citizen would conceivably be made aware and take ownership of the dialogue on climate change, and would require of their governments to do what is needed to give effect to their national determined contributions and other obligations following from the Paris Climate Change Agreement and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Such an informed dialogue, I submit, would go a long way in mobilizing climate finance to address matters related to loss and damage, adaptation, mitigation, and other climate-related issues. It would thus provide a rational environment, giving impetus to governments in the global north to include in their national budgets the requisite resources for climate finance, with the confidence that their citizens are fully behind them. More importantly, that developing countries are not seeking handouts, but are receiving climate finance on globally agreed terms. Pivotal and necessary force in the journey towards actualizing the positives of sustainability are the initiatives of the NGO. Thank you very much. 195 in 365. I repeat to the world at large, 195 in 365 is such a game-changing solution-oriented initiative coming out of small Grenada. You see, ladies and gentlemen, non-governmental organizations often act as the barometer of social conscience in a society, filling the gaps where there is institutional indifference and apathy. NGOs advocate effectively for positive change, facilitating essential developmental efforts and increasing the accountability and legitimacy of institutions. NGOs like yourself, with oversight and the pursuance of this mandate, can assist in restoring the moral compass of state agencies and governments and rejuvenate the economic conscience of corporate entities by ensuring adherence to the triple bottom line philosophy, where people, profits, and planet are given due consideration. Finally, it is therefore critical that NGOs like yourself, like 195 and 365, and I'm assured this is so, maintain its independence, free and independent from political interference, influence, or persuasion, guided always by a social conscience, and more importantly, by a universal social contract to create a just, humane, and equitable world. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.